accounts and just Jack yelling at Iron, calling him a dumbass, right? This has nothing to do with the debate. So why would comments...
This is the video record we have of the debate. There's only like 5 or 10 minutes on the front and back end that weren't really substantial.
Right, but the point is that this video itself is not simply just a video of the debate and then people commenting about the debate. This is a video making fun of Jack in particular, right? So of course there's going to be negative comments about Jack in the video, but none of those negative comments are going to be referencing whether or not he did good in the debate.
No, but that's incorrect because I think that the video makes fun of him because of the departure from his standard behavior, right? His standard behavior is to like make the arguments, be relatively well-reasoned and well-understood and stuff. But in this one, he completely broke down and essentially just acted like a child for like 20 minutes or whatever. And so that's why he's being made fun of in this particular instance. That's why this video is noteworthy.
Yeah, but it still doesn't show anything to do with the debate itself, whether or not their opinions are referencing the debate, right?
Well, why would Pogan? So let me ask you a question: because what Jovan's saying actually cuts against Pogan.
Unless you want to change
what Jovan says cuts against Pogan.
Unless you want to change the claim to, you think Jack
never defer Pogan. Never defer Pogan.
You think
you have to do it once in your life.
You think Jack lost?
Look, defer for one goddamn time in your life, dude.
I think what Jovan said seemed to cut against Pogan because isn't Pogan commenting on that video asking about who won the debate?
No.
So isn't that... Huh?
Pogan said, do you think anyone's convinced? And then Iron said, no, yeah, check out those comments from that video. Iron's the one that brought in the video.
What was his what's his comment? Because I thought it was like, does anyone construe that as Jack losing, or it had something to do with winning or losing or coming out on top, or what is the comment?
There's a screenshot of exactly what I said in general chat if you scroll up.
Just repost it for him too, real quick.
I'll repost it. The quote verbatim is really, we have the evidence in front of us. Do you think anyone here would be convinced that he came out on top in that debate? To which he responds,
it cuts against, don't you see how that cuts against Pogan?
No, it's not the video. He's not referencing the video where Jack is yelling and calling him a dumbass.
Well, it doesn't really matter if he's talking about that video, then he's just talking about the video as it's a debate.
So where did Pogan get the information from? Because Pogan wasn't around when this debate took place.
Yes, I was.
No, I don't think you were.
Yeah, he was. He was back. This was back in Godless' server.
So Pogan is saying, really, we have the evidence in front of us. Pogan, by evidence in front of us, are you talking about the people that witnessed the debate?
Yes.
Okay, obviously, because that's contextualized in the next fucking sentence where it says, do you think anyone here would be convinced that he came out on top? This is basic reading comprehension. Then Iron says, yeah, check out the comments from Tomer, which is referencing this video in particular, is what Iron specified. Now, this video in particular has nothing to do with that debate.
What was the comment in front of us that he's referring to? It's not the video that he's commenting on.
I just said that. Why didn't you? Did you not listen to what I said?
I must have misheard you, or I didn't get it. Slow down.
I even asked Pogan to clarify after I said to make sure. It was referring to the people who witnessed the debate.
Iron, were you just talking about this video as a debate between you and Jack?
Yeah, I was just trying to make the case that I don't consider that a serious conversation about Marxism, which I guess he was suggesting that was a serious debate about Marxism that I lost.
We just clarify that the video is not what I'm referring to when I say the debate. So that
are there people in the video saying that Jack
If that's the case, then they're just talking past each other and there's no disagreement.
I'm saying, are there people in the video that say that Jack won? When he says the evidence in front of us, is he saying this video shows that some people that saw the debate actually said in this video that Jack won?
We already clarified what I meant when I said the evidence is in front of us.
I'm asking you. I must not have understood.
I said it's not a reference to the video.
It was a reference
you said it's a reference to the people that saw it. But the people that saw it, are they in the video or in the comment section? So if they're in their comment section, that just goes completely against you. You lose if that's the case.
No, the people in the comment section are the people that seen the video, not the people that witnessed the debate that he's talking about. He's talking about
where's the evidence? The people that seen the video. Where are the people that seen the video?
We already clarified this. I was referring to people that were present for the debate. Some of which are in the community.
I was present at the debate and I don't agree.
Let's just clear this up, because this sounds like just a misunderstanding. Iron, were you just simply talking about...
Is it the case that people in that video, the debate didn't happen in this video, but did people that see the debate weigh in about who won in this video? If so, that could be evidence. But is that what Pogan's talking about?
Not only that, Seamus, listen.
No.
Hold on, I gotta know.
We don't think there's no reason to think
that.
that the people that were there that witnessed the debate then went and watched the video and then commented. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
but what does he say? He's saying that there's people in that video that saw the debate, and he's appealing to the people in that video that saw the debate?
Well, ask
I need an answer.
I thought I clarified.
No. I need just a straightforward yes or no answer. Is that right?
Repeat the question.
So when you say the evidence is right in front of us, and I said, what does that mean? He said, the people that saw the debate. Okay? So the evidence is the people that saw the debate, and the evidence you're appealing to is that there are some people in this video that did see the debate that are talking about it after the fact, and they said that Jack won?
No.
That's what you're saying? Okay, then you're going to have to explain to me, because I think this seems confusing.
People in the community that were present for the debate.
I don't know how is that right?
In the comment section. They weren't in the video. Where's the evidence? Where are they at? They're imaginary.
Can we clarify this? Is the video that I'm looking at right now? Jack let Iron know exactly what he thinks of him. Is that a video of the debate between Iron and Jack that we're referencing?
You're throwing this off. We were almost to the end of that line of reasoning. So he's appealing to people that saw the debate.
Let Shamos finish.
He's appealing to people in the debate that heard the debate, but not necessarily ones that are speaking in the video, nor not necessarily ones that have posted on the comments. So where is this evidence before you? You're just saying that there exists people in the community that saw the debate that you know of, and that's the evidence that's before you?
Yeah, that was stated.
How could that be interpreted as the evidence is right before us?
I just told you how. It's
hold on, Jovan. Let him finish the line of reasoning.
I'm sorry. I'll let him.
It's already been answered, right?
So there's evidence right in front of us, and what he means by that evidence is people who are neither in this video, neither have commented, that are just in the community. So where's the evidence right in front of you? It's not in the comments. It's not in the video.
Clarified.
Where's the evidence again?
This was already clarified.
You're appealing to people that's seen the video, but none of them are present.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay,
just tell us what you mean. Just tell us what you mean.
No, I don't think I'm confused at all.
He's told him what he meant 100 times.
Well, then just say it.
But the whole notion isn't compatible with the statement.
Just say it again, Pogan, please.
Right here in front of us. Don't you mean when you don't you listen?
Shamos, let him say it again. Let him say it again.
The evidence is right in front of us that it's equally accessible to both people. How is it equally accessible to both people?
It is.
How is it equally accessible to both people? Do you know Irons talk to the same people in the community?
Do you want him to answer? Do you want him to answer? Do you want to just keep talking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Iron is perfectly capable of speaking to the people that I'm referring to, right? I've given.
You didn't refer to anyone
multiple times.
It's not whether he's capable.
He was referring to people in the room.
Right in front of us. This isn't about Iron's capabilities. This is about the nature of the evidence.
Look,
this isn't about Iron's capabilities. Of course, he's capable of asking those people.
All right, Joe.
He's capable of checking on those facts.
He contextualizes.
That doesn't mean the evidence. Oh, this is so fucking retarded.
Stop, Jovan. Look, you and I should just fucking step away for a second, okay? You and I should just not keep interrupting. Shamos is more than perfectly capable of directing how this is going. Pogan is more than capable of answering the questions. Just let them hash it out, please.
I've already given the clarification. Nothing Jovan is saying is wrong.
Like, I take it what it means to say the evidence is right in front of us, that there it's all right there spelled out in front of everyone. All you do is have to look at it. But what you mean by the evidence is right in front of us is that Iron had the ability, had he wanted to implore and ask about who won the debate. And that's what you mean by the evidence is right in front of us?
Yeah, asked and answered, Shamos. I don't really care what you interpret my statements to mean if I give you what I meant when I said it.
So the evidence is just people you've spoken to. And that's right, and that evidence is right in front of Iron.
You don't think Iron is capable of speaking to those people?
Look, I of course he's capable of speaking to them, but does that mean the evidence is right in front of him?
Yes.
Okay. I think what's going on is you've made a boo-boo, and you know that you did. You know that what you said in that video is actually presupposing against what Jovan was saying. It goes against what Jovan was saying, because you even presupposed that it's something about the comments or something about the video presupposed that there was an argument that could have been won and could have been distinguished. But you're not talking about that. You're just talking about people you talk to independently on your own accord, and then you're flaunting it in front of Iron's face saying, look, the evidence is right here in front of us. Oh, really? Right here in front of us? You mean right here
You're
in
just
front
confused. It's been clarified multiple times. Why do we care what you think of my comments if I'm telling you what I meant by them?
Well, maybe he might be saying.
I'll tell you what the irony is. You guys were accusing Iron of presupposing that there was an argument that was won and lost either in that video or in the comment section. And then y'all started saying neither is there any of the debate in the video, nor is there any debate in the comment section. And lo and behold, Pogan's comment presupposes that the evidence was right in front of him, either the debate or the comments. And the only way he salvages it is ad hocly by saying what I really meant is that I talked to a bunch of people on my own accord, independent of Iron, and then I flaunted it in his face that the evidence was right in front of him. That's just fucking bullshit, man. I think I've made my case. I don't have to go any further.
Well, I mean, the case is just that you misinterpreted something I gave you an explanation for multiple times, and so did Jovan.
What really is that you said something incoherent, and then you went ad hocly to change what the meaning of what you said, and it makes zero fucking sense.
And you'd be wrong about that.
Pogan, let me ask you something. Do you agree that in this video... No, just relax, man, relax. Do you agree that in this video, in this particular video, Iron came on top? Yes. It's just a simple question, man. You just have to say yes or no.
Well, I think he said that he doesn't want to talk to you, Tasteless.
Yeah, but I want a reason for it, at least.
It's irrelevant to the discussion whether or not he came out top in that video.
No, it is not irrelevant. It has to do better, but I want an answer. I'm going to need an answer.
Well, you can keep waiting.
Are you afraid, Pogan?
I just don't like talking to you because I think it's a waste of time.
Yeah, of course.
It is a
waste of time for your ego, because you know you don't have the goods to fucking face this shit, and you know I'm going to wreck you. Whether if you engage, you know you will lose, right? This is why you're terrified, because if you think you had the goods, you would fucking face me no problem, right? But you don't. So therefore, you stay there trembling, avoiding, and hiding like a motherfucking pussy. Okay,
you're more than welcome to forward a flawed narrative.
So Pogan. I mean, I take you. You say that you're like what you were meaning by the evidence being before you was, what you later said, the ability to appeal to the room and the judgment of those in the room. But I'm with Shamos in that it seems like an unconventional way to phrase it.
Are you asking me to concede that it's an unconventional phrasing? I don't have a problem conceding.
Well, there's a fallout from not only is it unconventional, what it means to be unconventional is that it's not. It wouldn't be. Someone can rationally not know what the fuck you're talking about, and it's like
unless they explain it to you explicitly, which I did. Look, it's only going to be rational to be confused about something unconventional if you don't receive an explanation. But an explanation was provided to you. So you're just continuing to misunderstand and forward a narrative that I've told you is wrong.
No, Shameless, you're forgetting other stuff because they were arguing about the interpretation about the comments, right? So if what Pogan's saying is true, why would he be arguing about what the comments say when that wasn't even relative or relevant to his fucking claim? When he said the evidence right before you, he didn't even fucking need the comments.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
Because I'm responding to evidence he put forward for his claim. Look, the claim was that he won the debate and he was appealing to the comments.
Yeah, but why would you need to refute it if you thought that there was no debate that took place at all? Your defense presupposed that there was.
No,
that's what Tom's saying.
I could just look at the comments and show that they don't support his narrative. There's no reason to think that presupposes what you're saying. It presupposes.
The question is, Pogan, did you think that video was in reference to the debate? Because if you did, then that makes it perfectly reasonable for you then to get the comments, right?
Tom's video?
Yes.
Jovan has to lay it out for Pogan. Pogan, if you say this, then your position is now coherent.
Could I just respond to Jovan's
being dishonest?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to Jovan instead of getting the memester interpretation of what he said. Look, I put forward. So there's a similar video on my channel, right, in which the comments are pretty critical of Iron. I looked at the comments for the video because he laid it forward as evidence for his claim, and it seemed pretty apparent to me that none of those comments were supporting what Iron was trying to say they supported. So I posted a screenshot of those comments explaining that, look, this doesn't seem to support your claim, and that's how we ended up here. I don't see the issue with doing that.
Well, it's like saying someone brings evidence to the table, right? And then you have reasons to think that there cannot, in principle, be evidence for that claim, right? And yet they present the evidence, and then you go on to try to refute the evidences individually, just prove that they're false or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue with what I did.
It seems like if you enter into the debate, right, trying to falsify the evidence, okay, then you don't. It's like you're already presupposing that there was a debate. If you're trying to falsify,
you've said that like 3 or 4 times, and you still aren't explaining why it's the case that I'm presupposing what you're saying. I'm presupposing.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it to you right now. You cut me off.
Well, because again, you're just saying things without supporting what you're saying. I have no reason to think you're going to support something you've said 3 times already with no justification.
Yeah, I give an argument from an analogy. I was trying to detail that right then, and you interrupted.
I think I've asked and answered. Well,
it's pretty clear.
I think I've answered all of the questions.
So
that
you
were
had
asked of me.
You had a disagreement with Iron about whether or not it was the perception that Jack wrecked or Iron got wrecked, whatever, right? And then you made a comment that it's evident, right? The evidence is right in front of you, right? And by that you meant the people around in this room who I talked to and agree with me. And Iron counters. He says, "Well, yeah, I can support that I came out on top because after you said that, because we can just look at these comments here, right? So those comments have nothing to do with your claim. Yet you're like, okay, let's go through the comments and like hash it out. What the fuck?"
That was a bad decision. You definitely should have just pointed out that it was irrelevant, right?
He doesn't have to do that if he thought that there was no
Wait, so that's wait. Is that supposed to be like the gotcha here? If you're just getting me to concede, sure. If you're just getting me to concede that it was a mistake to post screenshots of the comments, even though they were irrelevant, right? Whatever.
Yeah, why would try to refute the comments individually? Why try to go through the comments and refute them individually?
It doesn't change the fact that Iron's claim would be unsupported.
But you also tried to interpret them.
Don't you think it would be rational for someone to think that you're going through and you're trying to refute the comments individually?
It would only be rational.
Let him finish now, Pogan. You wanted him to let you finish. Go ahead, Shameless.
Yeah, but hold on real quick. But you were also going through the comments and you were interpreting them to support your claim, right? You were saying, yeah, these all go in my favor, right? I don't see anything here.
No.
Yes.
Well, he said they weren't negative about Jack.
All I said was that they were talking about his weight or the way he was breathing or the way he was talking, right? I didn't try to construe the comments in a way that would support some claim, which, by the way, right, wasn't the point of looking at the comments.
It doesn't matter, even if they're neutral. That's still support for your claim.
What? I'm responding to a claim he made. He gave evidence for his claim. I'm explaining that.
Yeah, if you're pointing out that they're neutral, you're refuting his claim.
Well, what he's saying. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Listen. 2 things happened, right? One, I claimed that I didn't have a serious conversation about Marxism with Jack, right? And then you mischaracterized that by saying, "Oh, are you saying that you came out on top with the conversation with Jack?" That has nothing to do with what I originally claimed, right? But in response to that claim, in response to that mischaracterization of yours, I said, yeah, I saw comments that generally indicated I did well, right? That I came out on top, especially considering I grade Jack on a curve, right? Given his notoriety in the community, his capacity to engage in real debate and stuff like that. If a majority of comments are going to an aside issue like his heavy breathing or him acting juvenile, etc., as opposed to saying like he did well, or Iron didn't have good points or whatever, then I take that as an indication that he did not do a good job and that I came out on top, at least relatively speaking.
Yeah, we've already been over why that wouldn't be support for your claim, right? You tried to forward something as evidence for your claim. I posted screenshots indicating that it doesn't seem like these comments are reflecting any victory that you're purporting whatsoever, right? I'm not trying to float the idea that I'm construing these comments as evidence for the claim that Jack won, only as evidence against the claim that you came out on top in some sort of discussion. So nothing you
Yeah,
said.
I take the fact that nobody called
You're
me.
talking over me.
I take it as being the case that nobody called me juvenile or made fun of me. I came out on top.
Yeah, you're talking over me. Look,
Pogan, you literally interrupted me every time I spoke. The last 5 times I spoke, and now you're stonewalling, saying he's interrupting.
I guess I get over
You can't be serious,
All right,
bro.
Iron got to finish what he. Iron actually got to interject and finish. So just let Pogan finish what he's saying.
We don't need Shamos to interrupt.
There's just gonna be no
I'm just saying, is it or is it not the case that the last 5 times I spoke, he interrupted me, and Jovan called him out on it the last 3 times, and yet here he is being interrupted right now, and
everyone does that. You've done that too.
No, but what I'm saying is he's interrupting the fuck out of people.
I'm trying.
He's interrupting the fuck out of people, and we're allowing it. Okay, the first time he's interrupted, he completely stonewalls and won't go past it.
Okay, Jovan's gonna take over. He's not gonna allow it.
You think that's acceptable?
Jovan's gonna handle it.
I've just been stopping him, Shamos. Now you're interrupting the conversation, Shamos.
Yeah, but is it or is it not the case that he interrupted me the last 5 times I spoke?
Who the fuck cares?
So he can interrupt anyone he wants, but the first time he gets interrupted here, he just stonewalls. Nope, you're interrupting me. You're interrupting me. You're interrupting me.
Moving forward.
What the fuck if I said that?
Okay, all right. Shamos, moving forward. Jovan is on top of it.
Go ahead and finish, Pogan.
I mean, I completely forgot what I was saying because I had a lunatic screaming at me.
You need to learn conversational etiquette, and we're gonna beat it into your head one way or the fucking other.
You just screamed into your mic for a solid 2 minutes.
Hogan, you interrupted me and Tom every single time that we spoke for the last 5 exchanges.
Moderator.
And then, and then how come it is the first time here you are being interrupted and you just stonewall completely? Did anyone do that to you?
Who the fuck cares?
You have no conversational etiquette. You think that you think you like are a hypocrite.
This
you think
the
that
weirdest side point.
To do that to you, but you do it
just move on.
I really don't fucking care.
An irrelevant side point.
Okay.
Okay, so is that it? Iron, anything else to say?
I think Pogan face planted, and I think he's a juvenile, intellectually incapable groupie.
Iron, do you think the support for that claim, the evidence, is right in front of him?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think this time it actually is accessible to everybody, as opposed to like him circle jerking with his friends in the corner.
So the idea that I face planted because you couldn't support a claim that you made is just hilarious. I don't know why you would try to float the idea that somebody face planted when you made a claim, right? And then you tried to provide evidence for the claim that was shown not to be evidence for your claim at all. It just seems like you're walking away from a conversation.
Pogan. Hold on,
There's no reason to think that you won.
Listen, Pogan, you just have to, when somebody is like trying to interrupt you like that, with that desperation in their voice, right? When they're trying to concede, when they're trying to beg you for mercy, because they just want to say that you were absolutely correct and that they've learned the error of their ways, you just gotta let up, bud. I agree that you BTFO'd me and you're the boss and your reasoning skills are superior to mine, so I concede, buddy.
High five, Pogan.
There you go. You did it, Pogan.
Got him.
You did it, Pogan. You won. Good job.
This might be Pogan's first ever victory. Holy shit.
Can we key that music from the karate?
This is just brutal.
You need a plaque.
You did it, Pogan, man. All those interruptions and your over-talking me's, they paid off.
Well, Iron needs to improve his debating skills because he's just no match for Pogan.
Right. Now, Brenda, just on a side note,
oh shit.
As someone who's this is not this is gonna be this is gonna be a softball. Don't worry. Putting myself in your position for just a moment. Now, I know that we definitely don't have a history of liking Iron, and we definitely don't have a history of liking Pogan. So, who the fuck do you root for in this case, man?
Oh, damn, that's a tough one.
He likes Pogan way more than Iron.
Brenda's
leftist sentiments are so strong that Iron's views on race realism and fascism and National Socialism are just too much for her leftism to handle, and she would still prefer Pogan over Iron.
I actually don't think it's as close. It's as distinct as you think it is. I think it would be pretty close.
Iron has been gone for a long time, and after a while,
he's been gone.
Yeah, I think Pogan has been.
Iron's a Nazi though.
I have to admit, Tom, there's a certain amount of Schadenfreude going on.
Yeah,
Iron's not
but
a Nazi.
I need to.
There are no Nazis.
I need
They're all
to
gone.
temper that.
All
I
the
need.
hatred for blind people in this server.
No. Look, the Schadenfreude is like you like to see Pogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
See, because he's the most recent person that's kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, if I'm going to be strictly rational and strip all emotion out, I would have to go with Pogan because his politics more closely resemble mine.
Right. But for
That's
now,
emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to.
Politics is just going to boil down to your fifis. So it is emotional.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Are feelings really necessarily?
Well, you can get the best of both worlds, Brenda. It's like you can just, for the time being, enjoy the destruction of Pogan, and then when Iron begins to circle around and become more of his old self and be more vocal about his heinous thoughts, to you, of course.
Right.
Then you can just kind of like be like, you both are pieces of shit.
Is this the same Brenda touting rationality now that spent a solid 3 hours making what amounted to an ethical objection to Marxism earlier? Or am I just hallucinating?
See, this is the source of the Schadenfreude. See this? See that attack?
Tom, when you asked Brenda, I thought it would be like a sure shot that it was just going to be Pogan. But now when Pogan speaks, I see why you would ask.
Right.
I was doubting why you'd ask in the first place.
I definitely thought, like what she said was exactly what I would have guessed. I think definitely initially she's anti-Pogan more than she's anti-Iron. But after a while, that'll probably just even out, or she'll favor Pogan.
But those are just the fleeting thoughts of the heart. But when my mind takes over, I have to concede that politically I'm more closely aligned to Pogan than Iron. Although I'm not sure about Pogan because he kind of came in here as a right winger, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
A long time ago. So I kind of wonder what his politics actually are.
Because it's not possible for people to have
some people accuse Pogan of being like a trender type of person. Oh,
that could be.
And they're communists. Maybe I'll be a communist.
He's a trender. He might become a trans trender.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was a calculated social decision.
Is this cockiness because people were sucking your cock while I was server muted earlier? I'm not exactly sure why you think you're in a position to talk down to me.
Oh my. It hurts, doesn't it?
Is that... Did Pogan just say that to Brenda?
Yeah,
wow, you're a douchebag.
It hurts.
It's just one of the most consistently retarded people
one
in the
of the
community.
many... Oh, sorry, man. Go ahead.
Why can't we just be friends?
Why can't we be friends?
Maybe he's done speaking or whatever, but Pogan is one of the many people that I've seen that have come through here and they just met their intellectual superior and they just were bent to Jack's will. Dude, Mikalash, Josh, Justin, fucking pretty much Pogan, Sonseed. Sonseed actually got half his foot in the door and then saw the dark side and then turned around. I'm actually more impressed with Sonseed because he never fully ever assimilated to that bullshit. He just knew it was bullshit. But Pogan bent to the will, Yuri bent to the will. It's just, I mean, guys, what do you really think it's more like?
Yuri's 5.
I got a question. What do you think it's more likely?
This is the part of the evening.
Do you really think it's more likely that Jack has all the right views, or do you think it's more likely that you met someone that's intellectually dominant over you and he just bent you to his will because of your inferiority? What do you think is more likely? He has all the right views,
or he just true dichotomy or a false dichotomy?
No, it's not presented as a dichotomy. It's asking which is more likely. So dichotomies are presented in such a way that there's only two options. So you don't even know what a fucking dichotomy is,
Wow.
Socrates.
Only one of them can be the more likely option, right?
Yeah.
Of the two,
obviously.
which is the more?
Let's try Seamus.
That's not what a dichotomy means. It's not like only one of them can be true in this instance. A dichotomy is either true or not true, naturalism or non-naturalism. They're opposite of one another. That's what it means to be a dichotomy. Okay.
Is it more likely that it lands on heads or tails?
So you don't know. You're not even speaking of what you don't even. You're not even speaking of what a dichotomy is. So you're look. You shouldn't say stuff like that because you don't even know what that shit means.
When you're talking about probabilities, I mean, like a probability is not a dichotomy.
Like necessary or contingent or something like that. Some people think are a dichotomy.
Look, it would be wouldn't it be perfectly reasonable to say that I think they're both just as likely?
Yeah, it would be reasonable.
Right. So there you go.
I wasn't presenting as if these are the only two options. That's what it means to present a dichotomy. I was just saying, out of these two options, which is more likely? So shut the fuck up. You don't know what a dichotomy is. That wasn't a dichotomy. Never was presented as one.
I mean, someone could just say.
You're trying so hard when you fucking say words that you don't even know what they mean against someone that's been rolling around philosophical circles for 5 years, fucking banging his head against every motherfucker that walked in the door. And you think for some fucking reason that you know what the fuck a dichotomy means.
I'm going to go ahead and say Seamus's presupposition that my views only changed because of Jack is false, and we can move on.
It wasn't a presupposition. I gave reasons. You don't even know what a presupposition is. Look at these faggots.
You didn't give reasons. You said, "Is it the case? Why is it?" You said, "Why is it the case that Jack caused your views to shift?" So what's the reason?
I gave inductive reasons. He did it to Mikulash. He did it to Josh. He did it to. I gave it.
That's not explaining why it wouldn't be a presupposition.
So that's not reasons.
That wouldn't explain why it's not a presupposition.
Look, what do you think?
If reasons.
What do you take it that a presupposition is?
Why don't you answer my question and then I'll answer yours?
Oh, shit.
All right. What's your question?
Why are you presupposing that my views shifted because of Jack?
I'm not presupposing that.
Okay,
I gave reasons.
So what's the reason to think that my views shifted because of Jack then?
Because I've seen many other people that views were shifted by Jack. Okay, so here comes.
Do you think that inference is look? Do you think
it's
that
inductive.
inference is justified?
Yeah, it's inductive. Yeah, it's justified.
So if I gave a competing inference, would you accept that inference, or would you be motivated to hold to the original inference?
So if what you mean by a competing inference is one that either mine could be true or yours could be true, they both couldn't simultaneously be true, or they both could be. False. Is that what you mean by competing? You'll give me another theory that mine's incompatible with, and they couldn't both be true. Yeah, if you could go do that. Yeah, go ahead, do that.
My views shifted because of exposure to the literature.
But you don't have any exposure to the literature. That's the thing.
What's the reason to think that?
Well, because I mean, I know that most of the philosophy that you know
what a dichotomy is. That's going to be a hard one to
right out of the tip of Jack's dick. You didn't go read like fucking principles of ethics by G. Moore, or you didn't. I mean, yeah, you said you read to page 50 on a book that Jack gave you a reading assignment on.
No, that was me.
That was Yuri.
That was me who said that. That was me.
I'm the one say what do you want to say.
I read the page 50.
So you just demonstrated that you can't even keep your story straight with respect to who you're talking about, and you actually didn't justify why you thought it was the case that I didn't read the literature. You just restated the claim. So I'm not exactly sure why we should be listening to anything you're saying right now. It just seems like you're kind of bloviating and talking about meta.
I take it what it means to be like, to know about the literature is to go in and kind of read from like, an introductory book to stuff like that. What you've done is you've read individual arguments of individual stuff. You don't even probably know about certain areas in the wider field or like other distinctions.
It means to read the literature.
I mean, like,
if what you think it means to read the literature is that you've read a couple papers here and there about some of the arguments.
That's not what I asked you.
I mean, really,
people to be well read on the literature.
What difference does it make?
You don't even know what equivocating is. Equivocating is where you give an argument and you use
the
same.
Answer the question instead of rambling.
Hold on, you don't even know what equivocation is, and I'm going to show you why I didn't equivocate.
Wait, Tom, what were you going to say?
Equivocation is a fallacy,
I have to let him continue rambling if he just ignores a question.
Well, I felt like this is just going.
Well, I mean, I just don't really see what it matters, right? I mean, the claim is that Pogan was bent to Jack's will. Right now, they've had conversations, and then like Jack may have supplemented it with a little like, here's a reading list for your homework. Like, what's really the significant like difference? I mean, and how is that not still bending to Jack's will?
Well, because the idea would be that the only reason my views shifted was exposure to Jack alone, right?
Wait,
and I'm saying the reason
Yeah, but the reading material is Jack's views.
No, look, I'm saying I'm saying, because we're talking about Marxism, right? We're not talking about philosophy right now. I was exposed to that literature before meeting Jack, right? I became a socialist and began identifying as a socialist prior to meeting Jack and assimilating into that community. So the claim that the only reason I shifted my political views is because of exposure to Jack just seems to be completely unjustified. And there's a competing hypothesis I just gave that I provided justification for. And it's clear that he doesn't even know what the fuck he's talking about, because he was talking about a 50-page reading assignment that wasn't even relevant to my story,
but that's
right?
not
It was relevant. You're talking over me. It was relevant to Yuri, right? Now you can speak.
I'm kind of interested in showing you what equivocation is, because you don't seem to know what it is.
I'm kind of
So,
interested
like,
in you.
so it's my turn. I thought it was my turn.
Well, are you going to substantiate the claim or just ramble about something irrelevant?
Well, look, I'll make this point and then I'll substantiate whatever claim that you think I haven't already substantiated, which I'm pretty sure I have. So I'll let you finish. So equivocation is a fallacy, okay? And just what it means is you use a word in an argument in two different premises, where in one premise it means one thing and the other premise it means another thing. Like the classic example in the philosophical literature is something like this. That baseball game was a fluke. Flukes are a large flat fish. That baseball game was a large flat fish. That's equivocation. It's a fallacy. It's because it doesn't follow about anything about what the word fluke means in the context of a baseball game being like decided or won on a very lucky whim or something like that. And nothing follows about that, about the nature of what a fluke is in the other sense. Okay, it's an invalid inference. And so the idea is you can only equivocate when you do that while giving an argument. So all you have to do is tell me what argument I was giving and what two words that were the same that I used in one premise and then another premise, and how they meant two different things. But you can't do that. What you mean by equivocation is I used a word differently than you used it. That's not equivocating. It's not equivocating to use a word different than somebody else is using it. It's only equivocating if you use that word differently in another place in an argument and try to lead it through an inference on two words that are the same but semantically mean something different. That's what equivocation is. So you don't even fucking know what that is either.
So are you ready to substantiate your claim?
Yeah, I've already substantiated my claim inductively. Yeah, I've already substantiated my claim inductively. I've been around for 5 years. I've seen many people bent in, that were Jack's intellectual inferiors and bent to his will. They knew less about philosophy than Jack. They knew less about the distinctions. And when they came in, they couldn't argue for it against Jack. And they just took his position. Okay. And they did it because they were intellectually inferior to him and he bent them to their will. What's interesting is if you go through 85% of the group, the views that are held by the group were actually views that were held by Jack before anyone else. And Jack just spread them out to them. There's only a small portion of their beliefs that are actually ones that Jack didn't motivate. There's some that Vic seemed to motivate, but most of all of them are Jack. So I even know the causal history of the views, and so it just seems like pretty obvious. So there's justification right there inductively and based on how they procured their views and which one had them first.
Okay, I asked you point blank if you would accept a competing hypothesis if I gave justification for it. I gave you the competing hypothesis. I gave you the justification for the competing hypothesis. And now you're just repeating the claim that you made before I gave the competing hypothesis. So do you have a reason to reject my hypothesis?
Yeah, the reason to reject your hypothesis is because mine is also competing. And there's more evidence for my hypothesis. So my hypothesis, if your hypothesis is true, mine can't be true. That's what it means to be competing. If my hypothesis is true, yours can't be true. That's what it means to be competing.
Well, then your burden is to show you have disconfirmatory evidence for my hypothesis.
Present a competing hypothesis and justification is which one can present more and better justification.
I'm not exactly sure why I have to listen to him ramble.
So yours is Pogan's all his competing hypothesis. I've read the literature. I've spoken with you about meta ethics. You don't know anything about the literature. You just know about very minute individual arguments. Only very minute individual arguments. Oh, that's not true? So you have read the literature on
I'm just waiting for you to give disconfirmatory evidence for my hypothesis, right? I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get lost in the weeds with me. You're trying to drag me into things that are irrelevant to what I asked you.
Okay. We have two hypotheses, right? They're competing hypotheses. We've already agreed on what it means.
Provide disconfirmatory evidence for?
Look, what I'm saying is
Wait,
this.
do you have an answer to that question?
All right, both.
Yeah. I've already showed you. I've already said that I've spoken with you enough to know that you don't know about the literature as a broad whole. What's that?
What do you think you're trying to provide disconfirmatory evidence for?
Look, this is what I think. If I can prove that there's better
question.
Here's the answer to the question. If I can prove that there's better justification for my hypothesis, and my hypothesis, if true, falsifies yours, then who's decided is who has more justification. So your justification is I've read the literature, take my word for it. My justification is I've spoken to you and I know you don't know the literature. You just know individual arguments that you spoon-fed out of Jack's dick.
Supposed to take your word.
Evidence too. I've seen inductively many people bent to Jack's will. Okay, I've even seen people converted out of theism, like Danny bent to Jack's will. Josh, fucking most of those guys, Yuri, etc., bent to Jack's will. I also know the causal history of the views and how they were acquired. Jack held those views before anyone else. They came with other views. They had a meeting of the minds, and Jack bent them to his will. And why? Because Jack knew more about philosophy than them, knew more about the distinctions, and they had no chance. Okay, and so there's the evidences right there. Now, if those are well supported evidences, okay, then it's a better explanation than your hypothesis. Okay?
So that's the second time you fucked up, because the first time you tried to float the idea that I was reading some 50-page assignment from Jack. That was wrong. That's Yuri. The second time you tried to say Danny was no longer a theist. That's wrong. He still identifies as a theist. So that's two fuck-ups there. Excuse me, I'm not done, right? That's two fuck-ups there. Your burden was to show you had disconfirmatory evidence for my hypothesis. You provided no such evidence. You just restated your claim and gave the evidence you provided earlier, which I've already countered with a competing hypothesis that I've justified. There's no reason to say that my evidence is just take my word for it when that's basically what you're suggesting for your hypothesis. So the claim's unjustified, and we can move on.
Well, no, I think his position was just not to disconfirm yours, but to make his more probable.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've been in the server for quite a while, but I kind of float in the background.
Show that there's more justification for his hypothesis is if he
so I've been in
this guy literally
these circles for a little while.
I don't know why you're interjecting in the conversation.
Because he joined 10 seconds ago and is running interference.
He's been around.
No. I just wanted to clarify something, or just put out a point that I think favors what Seamus is saying.
Well, I'm just going to completely ignore what you're saying then.
That's fine. But the idea is that it's not just the arguments that I notice that people adopt that leads me to believe that a lot of people merely adopt Jack's view for the reasons that Seamus put about, but it's the language they use, it's the sentence structure, it's the connotation. I noticed that a lot of people, especially in those circles, adopt all of that and follow, and you can almost preemptively tell who they've spoken to or who their influences are based on how they engage in that.
Right. I don't know why.
So I do believe that Seamus has a point in there, in that sense, but I'm also happy to concede that Pogan's a relatively smart guy and that he can consider arguments for himself, even if it is the case that certain psychological traits or even linguistic tendencies are adopted from people that he respects. I don't think there's a problem with that necessarily.
Well, two things.
I don't need to disconfirm Pogan's view in order to give a competing hypothesis that's got better explanatory power and more justification.
Right.
Also, there's something interesting to note. Pogan offered his competing hypothesis as a defeater to my view, right? He was saying, look, if this hypothesis is true, then that's a defeater to your view. Isn't it the same true that if my hypothesis is true, that's a defeater to your view? You've already agreed that they both couldn't be true. So it's not just saying like, look, I presented an altered hypothesis with some justification, and therefore that's a defeater to your view. No, my view, if it has more justification, is a defeater to your view. And so I don't have to provide a defeater to your view. In fact, if you think you've provided a defeater to mine, then by necessity I've provided one to yours.
Right? Do you have reason to disconfirm my hypothesis, or do you not? I've been asking
you disconfirm my hypothesis just by positing an alternative hypothesis, but that was competing. right? So you disconfirm mine by putting forward a competing hypothesis.
Yeah,
well, can I explain what I understood?
So you agree my hypothesis is competing. Can't I disconfirm yours by putting forward my hypothesis? Duh, motherfucker.
Yeah,
the idea is
I still don't understand like what Seamus's evidence is and why it's like more.
It's actually not even relevant to this.
So to try to recast like both views, it seemed to me that Seamus was making an
evidence
argument.
that Seamus would proffer would be like reasons to believe his thing, which means that there would be like explanatory virtues his hypothesis has, but I'm not like seeing what explanatory virtues his hypothesis has.
Well, so I think
not
that
even
Seamus
relevant to
was
what we're
trying
talking
to,
about now.
Seamus was trying to like argue for a high prior on the basis of other people in the community. So like if we take at random somebody in the community, he's trying to make an argument that such a random person has like a higher chance than not of being converted by Jack if it is the case that they hold to Marxism. Or whatever it was that was in contention. Hold on. Let me expand the other part. And I took the way in which Pogan was providing a competing hypothesis to be with respect to certain data, where that certain data was the fact that he had a belief revision. And Seamus was using that data of a belief revision to argue for his hypothesis that it was as a result of Jack. But Pogan, the way in which he was, quote unquote, defeating that view was by providing a competing explanatory hypothesis for the data of his conversion or his, change of view. And so the way in which Seamus, you should understand Pogan, is that he was providing a competing explanation for the data of his conversion. And so that's why there's kind of like a stalemate unless it is the case that you can bring other evidence to bear, because they would equally explain the conversion.
That's 100% correct.
Slightly more nuanced point.
Great.
What I'm saying is when
reiterating for 15
minutes, I was trying
to there would need to be disconfirmatory evidence targeting my view to further substantiate his hypothesis, none of which has been provided.
Yes.
So right now we're basically just
if my hypothesis is justified, it's a disconfirmatory. Let me see if I can explain it to Cam really quick. Okay. So what he's saying is he's offered disconfirmatory evidence against my hypothesis by offering a competing hypothesis. That is a hypothesis that couldn't simultaneously be true with I'm talking to Cam. A hypothesis that couldn't simultaneously be true with my hypothesis, right? And then he offered some justification for that hypothesis, okay? And so what he's saying is, if I've justified this hypothesis, and this hypothesis couldn't simultaneously be true with your hypothesis, then I've offered disconfirmation of your hypothesis, in effect by justifying a competing hypothesis, right? Now,
yeah, so I would agree that if that was the way the whole sort of situation was being characterized, then it probably is not the language I would choose. I took him by disconfirmatory.
Don't you agree that if my theory is competing, then my theory, if justified, is a disconfirmation of his. So he hasn't provided any more disconfirmation or less than I provided. I provided a competing hypothesis with justification. He's provided a competing hypothesis with justification. What I'm arguing is that I've offered a competing hypothesis that is more justified and is a better explanation of the facts. That's what I'm saying. And so it isn't like he's defeated my view, and I don't, and it doesn't matter until I can offer disconfirmation of his, because he's already agreed in essence that if it's a competing hypothesis and I've offered justification, then that's reasons that is a defeater for his view, or whatever the word he was using.
Yeah, I understood what he was saying there to be like, okay, this evidence that you thought was evidence for your claim is your claim only, but it's also working for my claim because my hypothesis is competitive over that same data. That's what I understood him to be saying. I might have misinterpreted
we don't have the same data. You keep in mind, my data, my background information is not the same data he's using. I'm using information that Jack has done this to many other people before. Right. I know the causal history of
it. And that's why
Jack didn't acquire their beliefs. They acquired Jack's beliefs.
Just a real quick
Jack
note.
Held the beliefs previous. Jack knew more about philosophy. And so we're not, look, so his don't explain those facts. His, in fact, don't even touch those facts. My hypothesis explains all of those facts and his fucking behavior.
Well, that's why I characterize what you were doing as arguing for a prior. And I thought that you were doing it. It doesn't bear directly on Pogan as an individual, but it raises the prior probability that any random individual have been influenced in the way that you
How do we know this isn't confirmation bias?
Look, if you think Pogan has similar features to the same people that were bent to his will, then it's the sample's representative, right? And so we could generalize from that sample.
The whole view seems to come down to an accusation. Well, maybe I shouldn't say the whole view, but of substance, it seems to be there's some type of accusation about Pogan's honesty with respect to his belief revision process. And so the subject of discussion is about Pogan being an honest individual or something like that.
No. I don't think that's what the claim is. I'm not calling into his question his honesty or his integrity. All I'm saying was he ran into someone that knew more about philosophy than him, and his intellectual
You said that he hadn't read the literature when he claims that he has.
Okay, well, I claim with respect to that fact, he's not being honest, but not in what I'm speaking of here. Yeah, of course he's not being honest with respect to that fact. I don't think he's read the literature at all. In fact, what I take it was when someone's read the literature is when they start with they read it more broadly. They don't just look at a couple individual arguments for certain views. They've start out with an introduction to metaethics, go on to read more about the field, could tell you about all the views: individual subjectivism, moral relativism, cultural relativism, moral realism, non-naturalism, naturalism, moral, could describe you all the positions, quasi-realism, et cetera, emotivism, universal prescriptivism. And literally understands all the positions and could even rattle off 2 or 3 arguments for each position. All the Blackburn posited quasi-realism and Blackburn justification for this. J.L. Mackie posited error theory, and these were his famous arguments. One's called the argument from queerness, and one's called the argument from moral disgrace. None of those things. That's what it means to be acquainted with the literature. Okay, Pogan comes in here and he knows specific arguments about semantic realism. He knows a couple different arguments about. He doesn't know the broad literature. It isn't like he's read all the things on what it means to be there to be content. Read the arguments for internalism, externalism, blah blah blah. He's read a couple ones.
You're going for a really long time, and you're saying so much that it's not really going to be possible for an individual person to respond to it. But just to go back a little bit, I think that the original contention was about Marxism, right? Now you're talking about a whole variety of other views that Pogan may or may not have. So maybe we either finish the Marxism thing, or maybe it's part of a wider case.
About Marxism. Pogan
maybe you're trying to say, maybe you're trying to say that Pogan as a whole, his belief revision is explained by this one hypothesis.
Never about Marxism.
This was always about the aggregate of Pogan's beliefs. It wasn't about
this was never about Marxism. Okay. This was about all of the beliefs that Pogan has acquired from Jack. Okay, Marxism, content externalism, external value properties, Milgram's view on compatibilism, all this bullshit. He knows about Milgram's view on compatibilism. Does he know about? Has he read the literature on compatibilism as a whole? Has he read Carl Ginnett? Has he read David Lewis? Has he fucking read Robert Kane? Has he read Peter Van Inwagen? Fuck no. Fuck no. He isn't familiar with the literature. This motherfucker is the opposite of familiar with the literature.
So reading all those people constitutes being familiar with literature?
What was that?
Does reading all of those authors constitute being familiar with the literature?
Yeah, I mean, at least having knowledge of those authors, their positions, their arguments, etc. Yeah, that's really important. It's really important.
When you say to be familiar with literature, it's just to be aware of their positions and their arguments.
It's not about knowing a couple individual arguments in a certain field, right? It's about knowing about the field as a whole, its divisions, its distinctions, who's proposed the arguments, what the classical arguments refer, what the modern defenders were. That's what I take it to mean, that someone's acquainted with the literature. When someone comes in and is just acquainted with a few arguments for a certain position, they're not aware of the landscape of that area of philosophy. That isn't familiar with the literature at all. I could tell you straight up, I'm familiar with the literature in metaethics. I could go through, tell you all of the distinctions, the necessary conditions to be a moral realist, necessary conditions to be a non-moral realist, et cetera, et cetera. I could go through detail every single one of the positions, how they cash out their view semantically, who are their initial proponents, okay, in some of the arguments that they propose. I could do that with literally every single fucking view there is. There's like 15 of them or more. That's what it means to be acquainted with the literature.
That's going to be irrelevant to what he said, though, because what he means is just that he's read enough of the literature to convince him of certain subjects. And
yeah, it seems like when you say familiar with literature,
it seems like every time you get into these discussions, Seamus, you just want to change what people are saying entirely to make it mean something else.
Right.
No.
Like people who would
yeah,
hear
I do
your
discourage
account,
that practice. Yeah.
and it seems like when people hear your account of being familiar with the literature, they might go away thinking, "Oh, by familiar with literature, Seamus means be well educated in this field." And I don't think people tend to think those concepts are synonymous with each other.
Also, I don't think it's okay.
I don't think it would be reasonable for a person to think that's what being acquainted with the literature meant. On Pogan's view, I don't think it's reasonable for them to think that's what it means.
Like, I would respect a scenario where Pogan hadn't read as comprehensively as you suggest he needs to meet that claim of being familiar with the literature. But I would take it to be like a completely normal thing for him to have his views changed by some form of engagement with literature. And like, I don't think that it's the case that you have to read the literature comprehensively before you have any shift in your views. Now, it might be that somebody points out to you some important part that you've missed, or like an author who argues well against a position that you currently hold. But this comprehensiveness condition, I think, is a little bit difficult.
I think there's another way that we could attack it, right? How many of you just think, okay, based on what you know about Pogan, what you know about Jack, what you know about all the discussions they've been having, what do you think is the case? Do you think that either Jack said, maybe you should read this type of stuff, blah, 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 and then Pogan went away, opened the book or opened the PDF file, read it, came back and said, now my view's been changed, without ever speaking to Jack at all about the issues? Or do you think what actually has happened is Jack has rattled off the arguments, okay, left and right. Pogan doesn't know a response to any of it, okay, and that's what convinced him. Okay,
Well,
you really think that he just went and read and just came back every time and was like, "Yep, Jack, I came back, I read the literature, and my views are changed." Guess what, Jack? I read the literature again, and my views are changed, and they're just the same as yours.
There's a third option.
How come every time he reads the literature, he takes the same view as Jack? That's a good question. Let's just answer that one. If he reads the literature and comes to his own conclusion, why does he always have the same view as Jack when he gets done?
Let other people talk, bro.
Answer that one question and I'll be done. Answer that one question, I'll be done. I promise.
Okay.
Answer that one question.
I swear to God. There's a third option, right? Which is he reads and then talks to Jack as he reads. So the distinction that you're pointing out is either Jack tells him or he only reads. Seems to be one of those. I know you don't like the word dichotomy, but seems like yet another dichotomy where he could be reading and talking.
It wasn't proposed as a dichotomy. You could just say, which one do you think better explains Pogan change in behavior, right?
Well, the way
I'm also inclined to. I'm also.
No one ever answered my question, and I remember I was so honest about just getting an answer to that.
I can answer it. The only plausible, the only answer that I could give that would explain the same thing, but not give your conclusion, is the idea that Jack's views are actually right, and the literature he recommends is compelling for good reason.
Yeah.
Well, I have another option, and I think this is more likely. It is the case that Pogan is a needy bastard. He needs recognition and acknowledgement. Now he sees in Jack this person who is recognized in the community. He has this authority figure, right? and it could be the case that Pogan read what or is aware of what Jack's positions are, and he wants to impress him, and then search for his own, looking for the whatever, right? In order for him to impress Jack and say, oh, this guy is whatever. And I think but Pogan is just acknowledgement from Jack that he's a worthy individual who's smart or whatever. And I think that is the case.
So going back to what I was saying earlier, like I am inclined to just trust what Pogan says when he says that he was introduced to some of these concepts prior to Jack. I know that he was specifically talking about Marxism there, but maybe if he could enter the discussion again, he would clarify.
Yeah,
I'd be willing to take your alternate hypothesis and find out which one you think is more likely, Cam. Like, let's just grant that you know, put your hypothesis on the table. That maybe it's just the case that Jack gave him the right literature, right? And it's compelling, okay? And Pogan basically was able to look at it, reason to it similarly to the way that Jack did, and come to the same conclusion. And it's in virtue of the fact that Pogan is a strong reasoner, and then that he saw the exact same things that Jack saw, or something very similar to the things that Jack saw, and the arguments were that good. Okay? Now, we could take that hypothesis, okay, that it just really is, Pogan really just understands the argument exactly in the same way that Jack understands them, especially when these arguments, I mean, I've read a lot of this stuff, and I know, I actually have been acquainted with enough philosophy to know that it's never that simple, and that it's always a hard, laborious time trying to get all these things consistent and figure them out. So do you think your view is more likely, or that he was just merely bent to Jack's will because he didn't know anything about philosophy? Jack's been doing it for like 15 years, has really, really good arguments, and Pogan just was unable to resist any of the conclusions because he didn't have the philosophical tools at his disposal to even combat the arguments in a healthy way. I think that's more likely.
So I want to point out something that you did there. I think you made the hypothesis overly specific. You could probably relax that criteria. So you said that the one hypothesis we're comparing against is that he had the precise insight and the precise understanding of the reasoning that Jack had, and that led. But that's not going to be a necessary condition for him coming to believe that the argument is sound, right? He could actually have a different understanding, and it could be still sufficient that he comes to believe that the argument is sound. And this might be because there is some other piece of background knowledge that's different to what Jack's were when he was reading the literature, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think you can give me that.
But I may get a caveat that would either be like the way that Jack understood it, or similar to the way Jack understood it. You know, and I mean, I think that pretty much. I'm not saying that it's completely mutually exclusive, but for the most part, these type of arguments work in such a way that they're kind of exclusive in that sense. It couldn't both be like that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know if it's helpful to kind of describe it as a hard dichotomy. I think it's perhaps you'd receive it better also if you worded it in a way that suggested that the weight of what contributed to his, let's say, conversion came from direct influence rather than being let's say, sufficiently acquainted with the literature. And I think he might even be open to that and saying, well, yeah, perhaps I've had more conversations or more time in conversation with Jack than I have actually reading it independently. But then I've sort of used the literature as confirmation. So it seems more combative rather than seeking to understand each other. So I don't know if that's just sport right now, but...
So if some of these arguments are really hard, they're really confusing. Like the rule following argument, like what makes you think that it's likely that someone presented the rule following argument with on their own devices, just reading it, is just going to come to the same conclusion that Jack does? Which one is very off base? That if there's non-natural sui generis properties, and we already committed that there is meaning and stuff like that. I mean, do you really think someone's going to come to that just on their own? Like in some of these arguments,
I can at least indicate
complex.
That.
This is what I would say. Last thing I'll say, really quickly. Imagine Pogan never met Jack, never spoke with Jack. Okay, but Jack was allowed, okay, to select all of the literature that Pogan read. Right. or whatever the literature that Pogan read. And then that literature is just shipped to his door. He's never met Jack, and they ask him to read all of those things. What's the likelihood, never ever talking to Jack, that he comes to all of those same views on all of those same topics? Okay, how fucking rare do you think that would be, given the complexity of some of these issues? And Pogan was a philosophical lightweight. I think it's like literally fucking astronomically impossible. Okay, so what? So what? The better explanation, if you have that same intuition there, is that it's way more better explained because of his interactions with Jack, and not just his interactions with the literature. What takes primacy in that explanation is his interactions with Jack. That should be super straightforward.
Isn't about just having interactions. The contention is what he finds particularly convincing. Now, having interactions with Jack could be what motivates him to read the literature, which he then finds convincing. Who cares if he has to be motivated? He has to interact with Jack first.
Yeah, I agree that I think could be the case. I'm asking, of these two hypotheses, which is more likely.
Very good point.
Thank you. It's there's no reason to think it matters.
Listen, I'm not presenting a dichotomy, so you don't win just by nature of presenting a third option. I'm saying, of these two on the table, which is more likely? If you want to offer your third option and say that option's more likely, go right ahead.
There you go.
So why is the third option more likely?
So Jack is already here. Jack has a remarkable ability of reason, of course. So Jack might be more likely to find the more convincing literature for people to read.
Yeah, that's already been proposed. The literature's super complex. No one understands Jerry's photo argument against natural selection. No one gets rule following on the first 10 passes. No one fucking gets it.
Jack suggests also like reading companions and other people to like go over them. Like, for example, he doesn't say, hey, you want to be a Marxist, read Das Kapital. What he recommends is Ernest Mandel's introduction to Marxism, right? Now, that's not direct Marxism right there, but that's what he recommends. And that's very convincing literature for Marxism.
But look, I mean, it's just kind of claimed via fiat that it just must be the case that the literature was more convincing, and the reason why is because Jack selects really good literature. But that's already been put on the. That was the first thing that's the first thing that Cam put on the table.
Oh no, but I never made the claim that was the actual true hypothesis.
No. He was just saying here's an alternate hypothesis. I don't even think Cam was necessarily endorsing it. What I'm saying, it's already been addressed.
Well, I will say, so if you hold on a moment, Shamos, this is nothing at all against Jack or like the folks who have been compelled into the same views that he holds. But I will say that I had to like practice some self-discipline to avoid getting like captured in the web. Like I did notice during that time that I felt a lot of feelings that were similar to when I attended church and were being like socially compelled to believe in Jesus. And I'm not making it like, it's like I think it's the same.
I like the idea
same
of Jack
type of
as
social.
Jesus.
The same type of social phenomenon where there are people around you who are convinced by these things and they're trying to suggest that you get convinced by them, and you have to be like very cautious to like really become convinced for the right reasons, not just like because people who you respect or people like not for coherence group thing. And so I've been very reluctant to sort of to shift like to make sure that I actually evaluate appropriately. And I'm still not a Marxist, and I'm still not somebody who believes in natural sui generis intentionality. But I've at least found Jack's arguments to be pretty interesting objections to certain views that I have held, and I'm not sure what to make of them yet. In fact, I'm currently engaged with a friend of mine who is in his PhD specifically on the following argument, or at least what Jack and Josh and that take to be the conclusions of it.
Wait, their thesis is on the rule following argument?
No. He's working in philosophy.
I have a question for Socrates, but I think I already know the answer given what he said, but I just want to confirm that that's his answer. So you think if Jack selected all of the literature, even the reading companions, anything that goes along with it, like you were saying, even the reading companions, even the companions to the reading companions, He selects it all out for Pogan, a novice, a complete novice in philosophy. And then he goes through and reads all of this high-level, very complex arguments and reads the reading companions. You think, without ever speaking to Jack, it's likely he would have came to the same views?
Well,
that just seems intuitive. Well, I mean, look, if it's in virtue of the fact that he was acquainted with the literature, then, and that's what takes primacy over the explanation, then it seems like absent of Jack, he would have come to those views because what best explains it, he was acquainted by the literature. And so what I'm saying is if he even had the reading pants, he had all those things, as a philosophical novice, approaching some of the hardest arguments in philosophy, literally the rule-following argument, Jerry Fodor's arguments against natural selection, some of this Bill Grommy stuff is super complicated about practical agency, and then he reads all the reading companions as a philosophical novice. You think the philosophical novice is going to come to all Jack's views just in virtue of the fact that he has the literature and the reading companions? No fucking way. That seems intuitively absurd.
No, the
And
point
so
is
what I'm guessing, the best explanation is not the reading, because he wouldn't have come to it through the reading alone. The best explanation is he sucked it straight out of Jack's dick, just like every other motherfucker that came through the door.
Yeah, but see, that's the problem. Is that seems to be
Seamus is correct here, guys.
That seems to be too much of a dichotomy there, Seamus. Like, I know that it's rhetorical and hyperbole, but I think that you are almost like undercutting and not allowing for inclusion Pogan's existence as a rational agent. And, you know, obviously we are folks overcome by social biases and, you know, all this type of thing. And we know based on the literature and psychology how much these things do play a role. But I think that, like, you are almost like framing it like an all or nothing. Like, he sucks the views out of Jack's dick.
Seamus is going to say that that's not a dichotomy.
No. I'm also saying it's not a dichotomy.
It would be a dichotomy, right?
So I'm just saying, out of these two, which do you think is a better explanation? Now, if you want to propose another hypothesis and give reasons why it's a better explanation, that's fine. And if you want to blur the lines and say, oh, well, it's a little bit of both. Well, what we should demand for is in the little bit of both, if that's what you want to claim, which one takes primacy, okay? Which one takes primacy? Which one was a stronger influence, okay? And so I think that's a reasonable question to ask, okay? And so, I mean, I would just like to fucking. I wish. Is Josh here? Godless, are you listening? Is Josh here?
Jack is here. Jack is here, Seamus.
No, he's sleeping.
Well, okay. Jack isn't honest a lot of times in these places, but sometimes Josh is.
You're such a
I was going to ask if Josh really thought. I was going to ask. I would ask Jack this. I'll ask Jack the same question. I'm not very confident that he's going to be honest.
Can we not get into that big giant fucking blow up thing?
What I wanted to know is if Josh really honestly thought that Pogan came to those views in a better and because of his acquaintance with the literature, and not in virtue of Jack giving him the arguments and defeating.
No, that's not the right question. The right question is whether he was convinced more by Jack or by the literature, not whether he just encountered them through the literature.
Yeah, the thing that I'm interested in is whether or not, like, the social phenomenon and, like, the fact that like these perhaps like respect or like social hierarchy thing, whether or not that had an influence. I think that's more what you're talking about, Seamus. So I don't know. I kind of think about like PhD advisors and PhD candidates, and you know how it often is the case that such candidates become quite influenced by their advisor. Maybe Jack's like a really good PhD advisor.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, a lot of those guys that are PhD candidates or whatever and all this stuff have already come through and have a master's degree. Pogan was a philosophical novice when he started going through some super complex argument.
Yeah, and so Seamus, underlying it, you seem to think that there's this really negative thing about Pogan having done.
Have you guys researched the argument?
Well, no, I was just saying that, like, is it really the case that you think that Jack's views are all right, or is it just a better explanation that you just didn't know shit about philosophy, didn't have the tools at hand to rebut or even conceptualize the arguments in a robust way, You couldn't resist any of the inferences, and he just dogged you out.
And I assume
I think that's probably more correct
Pogan.
because I've actually I've researched the rule following argument, right, when it was presented to me, simply because I had an antagonism towards Josh, right? So I looked into it, and there's a bunch of different solves to it that don't follow their specific interpretation, right? So if you were opposed to them, you might subscribe to an opposing view. You might be persuaded, or you might, if you agreed with them already, if you had a prior disposition, you might just automatically agree with them.
Yeah, Iron.
There's nothing demonstrating that there's an understanding of this this complex issue.
Iron, what are one of the solves to a rule following argument?
That seems like a big digression.
Just give me the best. Just what?
That seems like a big kind of left step.
Just remember he said that and ask him another time.
No, I'm saying it's coherent to what Seamus is saying, right? Because if you were authentically concerned about resolving the rule following argument,
to what Seamus is saying,
I'm saying it's relevant, right? Because if you were sincerely determined to find the answer to that problem, right, you might find any number of these different solves, right? But the idea that you would find just coincidentally the one that was put forward to you by the person that introduced you to the problem suggests that it's more likely that you were just subscribing to their view because of some kind of personality trait and not because you had actually gone and found the answer for yourself.
Well, I've read Wittgenstein's Rules in Private Language, right? And I'm just curious, right? You say that there are several solves to a rule following argument, but which one was the best one? And can you show how it solves the rule following paradox?
No,
can you even explain to us? Because I bet Iron couldn't even explain.
See, this is just a diversion. I think the point that Seamus has been trying to bring up the whole time makes sense, right? Very often when people regurgitate Jack's view on an issue, I mean they'll repeat it chapter and verse, right? It's not even the case that they just agree with Jack; they agree with Jack entirely in every aspect of the view. And I think it's fair to say that it's relatively unlikely.
They agree with him in his personality. They copy his mannerisms, like where Jack says "right" after every verse. They after every verse. Yeah, I said verse on purpose because it's like what Jack says is like Holy Scripture, But after everything they say, they got to say "right," and they even copy him down to his mannerisms. So you really think that? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that every fucking two sentences in the philosophical literature it said "right"? Is that what you think? You think every two sentences in the philosophical literature it said "right"? And the reason why Pogan always says "right" is because of the philosophical literature.
Seamus, that's just a silly thing to bring up.
Yeah, but Seamus says right. That's the funny thing. So Seamus is a Jack puppet.
Right.
Oh, that's right. Didn't he say he had to change himself out of that?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Seamus. Can you provide an argument for why? Because correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Can you explain to us or give us an argument for why we should believe that some of us who say right got that from listening to Jack?
Yuri, what the fuck are you doing?
Oh, I was just asking for the argument.
What is it with black people asking what are they doing?
I mean, given my background knowledge, right? There might be some other facts that I'm amiss to that might be reason to explain why you copy Jack's mannerisms and how he says things. But look, given the experience that I have, okay, and given the buddy and the causal history, I think it's the top explanation on the table so far. Okay, given my knowledge, I couldn't offer anything even close, right? Maybe fucking Yuri's uncle was got hit in the head with a hammer and he just said right all the time, or maybe there's some cartoon or a fucking Japanese anime that I'm unaware of that always says right, Even if that were the case, I think even if I knew that,
Power Rangers.
even if I knew, there was still more likely that it would be Jack. So I just don't even know what would be an alternate.
It's just stupid.
Sorry, we shouldn't. Cam's right. We shouldn't do this. It's just Seamus is trying to bloviate right now, and
so
it's not cool.
The part that I'm interested in is it is pretty clear to me that Jack has had a lot of influence over people in this community. And there are different ways of thinking about that influence. I think Seamus, you're wanting to present it in a really negative light. It's almost as if you hold the presumption that the individual reasoner when encountering Jack shouldn't have changed their position. But like perhaps a different view that we could offer is just that we are like these kind of, we are running into different people and being exposed to different subsets of information. And it is the case that like when the subset of information or the argument that you get exposed to with Jack, you're actually rationally justified in shifting your position with him on the basis of what was presented. You might be right, Shamos, that like if that individual actor then went later on and got a wider scope of philosophy, his credence in Jack's view might be low. You might be right about that claim. But to me, it seems that you are also saying that they are wrong to be influenced by him, and like the fact that they are being influenced is some kind of negative. And I'm not sure if I follow that, because it just sort of seems to be like the same thing we're exposed to any information. Like, for example, read an article, right? And I'm convinced by the evidence that's presented in the article and convinced by its reasoning. And like, we don't hold the view that I should just like suspend complete judgment proposition until I've gone sourced a wider array of literature. Like, we allow for evidence to be shifted just on reading that article. And it seems like that would also apply with respect to Jack, without needing to characterize active Yuri and Pogan as being some kind of dick-sucking irrational
I think that's
agents.
possible. I think it's possible, but it's just unlikely given the complexity of these arguments. Like, some of these arguments are so complex that it's possible that the literature is so good that it brought him to Jack's position. But not only is the literature complex, some of the ways they solves it aren't readily obvious. Like, for example, if you go like look at what like Kripke in the paper, right? He actually goes and kind of offers like argument by elimination. He kind of like sketches some good candidates for them, and basically like the non-natural property was not even mentioned or barely mentioned, and it seems to be people want to cash it out and like facts about cultures or natural language or something like that. There's all these responses. The fact that you sit there and say the argument goes through, it's a defeater, that it can't be cashed out in anything, some natural property, so it's a non-natural property, and that's like literally one of the more non-obvious complex solves to that problem. And you're gonna lead me to expect that it's more likely that a philosophical novice like Pogan came to that solve, okay, based on the literature. It just doesn't seem like
that isn't what I was saying, Shamos. In fact, what I was saying just then is like I want to like view Pogan as a rational agent who was exposed to a subset of information and reasoning and was rationally justified in shifting his view as a result of that. But that you also might be right that if he went and pursued a wider range of literature on the topic, that he might actually lose credence. So I'm saying that like your negative characterization of isn't or might not be ought not be judged in virtue of Jack's influence, but instead Pogan's like failure to do what you might consider epistemic duty of reading widely. Because I think that like you don't want to.
Didn't even contact anything I said. I just said, do you think it's more likely that a philosophical novice is going to come to one of the least obvious complex solves for a very, very complex argument, like the rule following argument and the non-natural response? You think that it's likely that a philosophical novice would come to that type of non-obvious response on a complex argument? Or do you think that...
No. I mean, of course, I think that like it's because he's heard it from Jack.
No, but I think what best explains it is he, like, if left to his own devices, like so if we think that the literature is the best explanation for why he has those views, then I think what that would kind of entail is if he just had the literature or whatever he read, that he would have came to those views. And that's just what it means to say.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't really entertaining that hypothetical because I don't know. Maybe was I meant to be entertaining that hypothetical?
No,
I just sort of took it as something kind of silly.
It's a weird shoehorn.
I was more interested in the conversation about whether like Pogan was doing something wrong by like finding an argument that Jack gave compelling. And it seemed to me that your judgment was like somehow like a negative characterization of him as like as a person.
I think he was trying to insinuate that he doesn't think for himself to some degree.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. And I'm saying that's not a good way to approach philosophy. To come in without the tools and adequately able to
right, but we're all learners in process.
You don't even have philosophical tools or distinctions or divisions to even know how to combat these things, you know? And like then you come in, you get rolled over, okay, and then you're like, yep, that's my view, you know? And then it's only in the virtue of your ignorance that's your view now. You know,
so I think
I
the
don't
thing
think
that you should be focusing on, like whether a person continues to hold that view for like some kind of extended period of time without ever going finding out whether there are competing views that are worth investigating. Like, because it might be like we're all learners of this, and we have limited time that we have to investigate. And like, you think that like Pogan's epistemic duty is to be influenced by Jack and read all the literature and find out whether. Sorry, I just got a. Yeah. Anyway, like I agree with you that Jack has. So, I think that makes complete sense to me. But I just don't really see like why you make such an issue of.
Like, to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised this was met with so much criticism. Like, I thought this would be pretty
because you
uncontroversial.
started by being an asshole about it. You kind of started
I'm just saying, I thought this would be uncontroversial. I'm actually kind of curious. Like, where do most people lie on the side of this issue? I propose that we make a straw poll and ask, what do people honestly think is a better explanation for why Pogan has all of Jack's views? He just read the right literature and came to it on his own, or Jack bent him to his will? And I would love to know what most people think. Can we create that straw poll? Because like I don't want. I don't really have anything more to say about the argument. Like I don't want to keep rehashing or whatever. Like if you have other points to bring up, I'll listen to it. But I'm actually curious what you guys think. What do you think,
he
Joe?
obviously doesn't mean every single view. That's just like nobody interprets what he said that way. Does anybody think that?
Don't be ridiculous.
I don't know why we're white knighting for Shamos. Shamos can speak for himself.
What if he
Don't
does
be
get some of his
ridiculous.
views from Jack, right? Like, what if there is like
Don't be
a
ridiculous.
view
That's
he
not
gets
what
from
I
Jack?
meant. Don't be ridiculous.
Wait, hold on. I have a question though. After Socrates is.
Yeah, like what if there's like
how many views do you think he shares with Jack though?
Yeah, like and which of those views
Yeah,
do you think
so,
are
like-
going to be attributed to Jack or to the literature?
Yeah, so like this was the question I want to ask, or I'm going to pose it this way, right? If we were going to divide it up into views, right? If we were to create a fraction, right, and we had I guess we could how should we a fraction or a ratio? It doesn't matter, right? If we were to say, let's just tally it up, right? If we were to have on one side Jack's views, right, and we have on the other side views that Pogan adopted that are the same as Jack's, but Pogan came to that conclusion because he read the literature, right? What if we see one tally mark or 1 point for like the left side, right? And that's for like him directly being bent by Jack's will, right? Or we have on the other side like 10 tally marks for like Pogan coming to it on his own, right? If we were to come to that, would that falsify Shamos' hypothesis? Almost, because it seems to me, right, if we were to break it up that way and we were to show how Pogan was to have some views of Jack's, but on the other side, the most of his views, right, came from, doing his own research. What would that show then, Shamos? If we were to find that?
Yeah, that would falsify my view, bro.
Oh, okay, you would accept that? Okay, cool. I just wanted to make that clear because I think that's a key point. If we were able to do that.
Well, I'm saying that's the opposite of my claim. So yeah, if that was true, you'd falsify my view. Like,
okay, now what if they, and just real quick, this is the last question. What if they came out as equal? What if we figured out that all the views that were on the left side were equal to all the views on the right side? What would that do to your hypothesis then?
I would concede. I was incorrect.
Okay, cool. Let's move on then. Let's tally.
All right, let's do the straw poll. Because I'm really fucking curious. I figured this would be super uncontroversial.
What is the straw poll of?
Straw poll is which is more likely all the views that Pogan, philosophical views that Pogan shares with Jack, that he acquired the majority of those views by being A, bent to Jack's will, or B, consulting the literature and coming to it on his own conclusion. And I just want to know what people think, because I think it's going to be a landslide. Like, most people are going to be like, so obviously.
I think you might want to say it's like refined.
Someone has to do that for me. I don't do that shit.
That's what I mean by the framing, though, Shamos, because like bent to Jack's will, it sort of just negates any like involvement of him as a rational agent. Like, and it's instead like some type of coercion. I couldn't agree to that view.
I think people generally get what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so like maybe drop the rhetoric.
I think you'd want to specify like refined views, though, right? Like he might have a predisposition towards socialism, but might be pushed towards Marxist-Leninism because of his experience with Jack, for example.
Anyway, it's an interesting. I have to go now, but it's an interesting topic, Shamos, like how there are community influences and whether or not individuals in the community think that they have like influences that are, not rationally justified. Or it's an interesting topic.
You want to know something really weird before you go, Cam? The hierarchies, because of the nature of this community, the fact that it's a debate community and kind of most of the traits in order to be like considered like a good debater or like good in this community or whatever, has to do with like your intellect and stuff like that. And what you'll find is these weird hierarchies develop. I noticed this thing that like Vic, right, who's really smart, knows his shit, blah 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 blah. He had like literally some of the hottest girls on Discord, like chasing him around and like riding his balls, because the power of these hierarchies is centered around like intellectual philosophical knowledge and stuff like that. And so what's happening is hot girls even understood the power structure and were trying to play the game. Like only in this type of environment would those girls ever care about Vic on that level, etc. And what I'm saying is,
Shamos.
I'm saying I didn't mean to say it like that. That's a little brash. You get the general. You get the general
He's a
notion.
good-looking guy.
What explains me, Shamos?
Are you just get the general notion of what I'm saying? Yeah, I said that not very politically correct. You guys are going to jump out of your seat because I didn't say that politically correct. You get the main thrust. You get the main thrust of what I'm saying. It's more disproportional than what he would get representative unrelative to that power structure. Okay, maybe that's a little better said. And the idea is this: all I'm trying to put a highlight on is that the power dynamic and the way that it influences people is all centered around intellectual and philosophical knowledge and dominance. And when you look at Jack, that's what they specialize in. So why wouldn't it be obvious, given the structure of that hierarchy, that's the people? Most people are getting bent to their will. It just seems obvious.
Good night, folks. Nice talking to
Good
you.
night, Cam.
You don't want to hear the incel post? All right, good night, Cam.
I love you all.
Bye. Yeah, I would go in on Iron, but JJ is now active, so I don't feel like doing that right now. I don't want to hear like stuff in the background like what? Why? Like when we talk about like stuff that's completely obvious, so I don't want to hear none of that.
Wait, what are you going to go in? What are you going to go in on me on?
Excuse. Yeah, it's just
I'm not going.
I
don't think I could say since JJ's right here.
Are you going to try and pester me about that? Are you going to try and pester me about that rule following thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you even know what the paradox even is before you even, and what not only what the paradox is, but what the goal of the argument is to show. I'm just
is it a paradox or an argument
about it?
Just clarify. Is it a paradox or an argument?
I'm fine. Look, I'm fine with just calling it.
Yuri, abort. Yuri, abort.
Why? It's Iron. Are you kidding me?
People have given Ken a bunch of shit already for coming back at all.
Look, just because everyone in like Holy or wherever says Iron's an idiot doesn't mean that you're gonna crush him.
Oh, I don't think Iron's an idiot. I just think he's dishonest, right? And I think dishonesty shows.
Fine, proceed, Yuri.
What am I dishonest
at your own risk, bud.
Why would you start with the rule following argument? Isn't Iron still a fascist?
He made a claim. No, he made a claim a while ago regarding the rule following argument.
Iron, are you still a fascist?
I want to hear that that line of reasoning. Isn't he still a fascist? Why would you
what
want
does that mean?
Like, aren't there more interesting things to talk to him about that are relevant to?
I'm not very good at politics. I'm more of a conceptualist.
It's like, imagine, okay, you have a clean shot at
Fascism is boring.
You have a clean shot at Hitler to end World War II. What are you going to say to Hitler? Instead of shaking him out or arguing with him, you're going to say, "Oh, do you know about the rule following argument?"
Yeah, nobody cares about that bullshit, right? We've been over that a million times.
Alright, let's let Yuri talk to Iron about the.
Well, I'm just curious.
Have you looked at the rule following argument? Like, how many do you think exist to it?
How many what?
How many solutions?
Well, I think they're attempted. I don't think they're actually. I think the question that you just asked me presupposes that they're solutions. I think they're attempted solutions to the paradox.
No, but I mean, like, obviously, in philosophy, people have disagreements that oftentimes can't be resolved, right? But they think that they've solved it with some kind of like argument or position, right? So I'm saying, how many proposed solutions do you think exist to it?
You want me to pull up like a natural? You want me to just like to pull up like some sort of metric or like number, or do you want me to give?
Listen, bud. I'm not the executioner. I'm here to kill you, right? I'm just asking genuinely, how many do you think exist? I'm not here to like put you on the spot and fucking get you.
Doesn't matter.
Right? No, I understand. I understand that. Right? I'm just not understanding the question. So I guess if you just want me to put like a number on it, I can just say like 5. I've came across like 5 or 10, maybe somewhere in that range, especially in this room, and from what I've read. And some are more sophisticated. Cool. Some are more sophisticated than others. Obviously.
Yeah. So what's the problem with that then?
What's the problem with what?
Well, if there's like 5, if there's 5 plus solutions, right? And we're saying something like, it just seems more likely that if somebody was exposed to the problem by someone that they were intimidated by or looked up to, they might default to that person's view of the solution. Why does that seem like remarkable or like contentious to you? That might be the case as opposed to them picking like one of those other solutions.
Well, I just don't think any of the solutions are actual solutions to the argument.
That's actually irrelevant to Iron's claim.
Well, I don't understand. I don't understand what Iron's asking.
So Iron's talking.
It might be a point of how they. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Like Iron's talking about like the likelihood that somebody would pick one solution versus another, including or absent Jack's influences. He's not really talking about whether they're valid solutions or not. He's actually not concerned with that at all. At least.
Oh, he wants to know if I know about these solutions.
I also think the problem compounds itself the more views that he has in common with Jack. Like, think about
why are we going back to this? We already talked about this, man.
Yeah,
well,
Sam,
I'm saying, like,
why are we going back to this? I'm obviously talking to Iron right now.
Yeah, this isn't about like what Iron thinks about the relationship to Jack. This is just merely a conversation about whether Iron knows about the rule following problem. And
so is Iron's question simply that I come to know about these so-called solutions to the argument from the influences of Jack, or is that what he's?
No, not at all. I'm just saying like there exist multiple proposed solutions to the rule following argument, right? Or like objections, or whatever you want to call them, right? I'm just saying like it seems to me more likely that somebody would default to one, especially if they're intimidated or look up to somebody based off their exposure to that person and that person introducing them to the argument, right? Like that's how various thinkers go about recruiting people to their schools of thought. They did in ancient Greece, they do it in contemporary academia, through universities, etc. So like I think that would just be like the standard way of doing things.
I don't know what you're trying to get by asking that question. If I say yes, I mean, what difference would it make?
Well, I'm just saying it's not like this special argument that only has one solution, which happens to be the one that Jack agrees on, right? It's a argument that has a variety of solutions. And so the fact that there's a variety of solutions, but this person subscribes to one introduced to them by somebody they look up to me, increases the likelihood of them essentially just like succumbing to the personal influence of the person they're looking up to as opposed to the veracity of the argument.
the reason why this questioning is so bizarre, I guess, because I asked you a question on could you explain what the rule following argument was and what was the goal of the argument, right? And it doesn't seem like by you asking that question, that gets us to an answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, we could try and play like a gotcha trivia game. Like I could try and explain
I don't see
general
the gotcha.
terms.
I'm
I
just
could try and
asking.
explain. I'm not intimidated, right? Like I can try to explain to you in general terms my understanding of it, if that's gonna like make you satisfied or whatever.
That's what I asked you because you made a claim regarding it earlier. So I'm curious if you, before we even have a conversation, do you even know what the argument is and what its goal is? Of course.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's an argument that tries to demonstrate that there's no physical fact in the matter which indicates which rule is being adhered to or not adhered to when one tries to exhibit some kind of behavior pertaining to the rule in question.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, sit down, faggot.
Well, I was just asking.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
the
buddy.
next question. Well, the next question I was going to ask, just so I understood that you had an idea of what the argument is that you said that you found several solutions, right? To the argument or the paradox, or however you put it. I forgot. But what solution was convincing to you?
I read about it a while ago in a Wikipedia article. I remember Josh was putting forwards like that non-naturalist kind of perspective. I think the one that I thought was the most compelling was the simple answer, I think it's called, which is that I think if I understand it, if I remember correctly, it's just that there's some sort of like cultural predisposition towards the rules or like cultural understanding of the rules, and that there's a simple solve where somebody just coheres to like whatever their cultural predisposition is.
I don't see how that would be an answer to the problem, right? Because with the problem, right, not what the problem is trying to state, right, is that because there is a normativity there regarding that fact of the matter, the idea is that if you think there's meaning when it comes to intentionality, you wouldn't be able to account for that intentionality under a naturalistic thesis, right? So I don't see how appealing the cultural differences regarding how one adheres to a certain rule would in any way impede on the actual goal of the argument. Because the argument, if I may, right, it just seems to me that when we talk about or bring up cultural differences and dispositions, right, but that's not incompatible with what the intentional realist is saying, as I'll get into later. But I think the idea simply is that because there are cultural differences, right, I don't see how that would answer the question, right? Because typically, if we talk about a person, they're going, of course, going to have certain dispositions and intentions towards certain things. But I don't see how appealing the cultural differences, right, would address the normativity that's taken place there. I guess is what I'm trying to assemble. So go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'm just going based off memory, right? So, like, if I remember correctly, it's suggesting something like people are exposed physically to different rules, right? And they're just following sets. And so any rule set that they're referencing or like any resolution they have for the rule following argument, like the question that's being put forward, is just going to default to some kind of physicality. And so there's not really like a contention there, right? Like they're just executing some kind of program they've been exposed to. There's no kind of like intentional question or paradox.
Well, I'm confused by that answer, right? So are you saying that you're denying the notion of intentionality?
No, I'm just saying intentionality might reduce to something like predetermined response, right? So like if you're exposed to the rule being 2 + 2 = 4, you'll execute that predetermined response just based off physical processes, and intentionality is just a descriptor of some kind of physical process.
Well, I don't think that could be the case, right? Because when we talk about intentionality being normative, what we're saying is that, like, if I was to reach, all we mean by normative, right, is that you can either be in or out of accord with some particular standard, right? And we typically refer to like dispositions as like some sort of agential term to like a behavior, right, or some physical state regarding an agent. So when we say that intentionality is normative, and I reach for like a glass of water, or I intend to reach for a glass of water, right? What's stipulated by it being normative is just that you have the potential to fail. So I don't see, like, if you can be either in or out of accord with that particular standard or have a potential to fail, I don't see how that notion can be predetermined by that. But I do think under the intentional realist view that it's not denying that there are certain like dispositions, right, that are predetermined, right, because of the environment or anything like that, because dispositions follow law-like relations, right? And in order for you to have intentionality, you would have to have dispositional states, right? Because your dispositions influence your intentions. So like if I was to live in like some other environment, right, my beliefs, aims, goals, and desires would be influenced by that particular environment.
It just doesn't seem compelling, right? So like I could try and let's say my intention is to lift 1 million pounds, right? Like that's what I'm really interested in doing. So I try and do that, but I'm frustrated by like some physical facts surrounding me. Just doesn't seem like a good argument against intention or whatever. Like I can have an intention that's frustrated by physical facts the same way somebody could have an intention to do some kind of rule that's frustrated by adjacent or surrounding physical facts that makes them incapable, or they do something else other than they intended. I'm just not sure like how that indicates that it's not physical.
Well, the reason why it indicates that it's not physical, right? Because the intentional realist is not going to deny that physical facts influence like these normative states. But the fact that if you're a physicalist and you do think that there is meaning and that there is normativity, right? That there's no law-like relation that you can point to, right, to that normative state to say that it's a conceptual argument.
Right.
I'm not sure what you mean, right? Because you're
right.
Yeah, we're not going to have that.
Your physical intention can be obstructed by other physical presences that override your intention, right?
I couldn't hear you due to the rights and me calming down. What did you?
Listen. If you have a physical intention, like I want to walk like 20 feet ahead, and there's like a brick wall there. Can't your physical intention be obstructed by a physical object?
Sure. I don't see what relevance that would have to do with anything.
So I'm just saying, like, can't you be in accord with the rule based off your physical intention or your physical desire, but also be like out of accord with some other rule at the same time, simultaneously?
Well, the point of the argument is just to show that if I was to do addition, right, rather than quaddition, the reason why I would choose addition, right, is because I'm trying to follow an addition rule. Or I guess the best way, I guess, to illustrate this almost is that because you're bringing up like predetermination and like physical facts, right? So if I was to have a garden, right, and I was to be a gardener for that garden, and I successfully planted crops, right? My corn crops grew every single year, right? Successfully. And then one year I do the same process, right? But for some reason, the corn fails to grow. Now, in virtue of what could we say that the corn failed to grow? And the way we would do that is that we would appeal to the intentions of the gardener, right? But imagine if we have like a second garden that's like almost like physically identical to the previous garden, right? And now there's no gardener there, right? But we see that we're there looking at the thought experiment, and we see that the corn grows in the same way the gardener did. The gardener did it, but this time it's due to some like natural cause, right? But one season the corn also doesn't grow, right? Now, in virtue of what then could we say that the corn failed to grow? And I think the point of that is to show that the normativity that's taken place there can't be accounted for by like some naturalistic thesis.
Yeah, but you recognize that under physicalism, there's nothing identical, right? Like that's one of the criticisms of physicalism. Like that's why physicalism can't be proven. It's not empirical.
Well, no, I understand that. No, I definitely, it's a metaphysics, right? So look,
what's the point of saying they're nearly identical?
Reason why it's just a thought experiment, right? The point is that we have a second garden, right? That's identical to the last one, but the only difference is that
all things not identical, right?
What?
It's not identical.
I just don't see why you're arguing this trivial point, right?
If it's not identical under
if you don't like
physicalism, it's going to lead to different results, right?
If you don't like physically identical, right, we can just imagine a garden, right, that is very similar to the last garden we had, right? The only difference is that there's no garden. If you want to be
right. But if there's listen, bud. Under physicalism, if there's differences, we would expect different results, correct?
That wouldn't be relevant, right? Because we just presented.
How is that not relevant?
We're not talking about brains. But I don't think you're smart enough. I don't think you're smart enough to understand
I'm asking you a simple
the difference
question.
between the thought experiment is and what a physicalist thesis is. So I'm going to ask you: do you understand what a physicalist is claiming, right? Because I don't think you do, right? So what the physicalist is claiming, right, is just that all mental states, right, are reducible to physical states, right? There's no, just reducible to physical states, right?
Is that all they're claiming?
Sorry, I'm not thinking what I said about the garden, right, and they're being similar, identical, had anything to do with a brain state. It was just saying, right, we could create a second garden without a gardener, right? That's all it was saying, and all it was trying to do is that the conditions, for the most part, were the same, except the gardener wasn't there, right?
Yeah. So conditions.
But you were too inept to understand that distinction. That you wanted to bring up physicalism.
Listen,
you wanted
relax,
to bring up physicalism, right?
You're getting
you didn't even know what physicalism.
You're getting
you didn't even know what
frustrated. Just
physicalism
relax,
was,
dude.
right? Because you wanted to equate the garden to being brain state.
All right. Listen, under the physicalist position, right? Different preconditions are going to lead to different results. So yeah, obviously, if there's two gardens with different rules or different assets in the garden or whatever the fuck you want to put in there, are going to lead to different results, obviously. I'm not sure what you're trying to demonstrate with that case.
Look, the claim you made, right, was that when we talked about a physically identical garden, right, but that was equated to physicalism. Then you wanted to talk about all this nonsense.
That's impossible.
Oh, shit.
You recognize that physically identical.
What hinges on them being identical?
Impossible under physicalism, right?
What hinges on them being identical, Yuri?
He's trying to smuggle in there being a determination about the different outcomes, essentially.
No, but seriously, Yuri, explain that. What hinges on them being identical?
There's no physical fact that you can point to differentiate.
He's desperately DMing Jack right now for the answer.
He left.
No, but
I don't think the
physical fact is in a relation and existence of another dude who's saying, I want this shit to grow.
I'm sorry, Iron, I had a phone call. What were you saying?
Did Iron
so
just beat you for
difference in these two things?
No,
one
I had a phone
caused
call.
by gardener, one caused by chance, but are nonetheless physically identical, are going to be differentiated by things that aren't going to be construed in terms of physical facts.
They can't be.
Well, not on physics.
There's a physical fact that one gardener was fucking doing some shit to this garden, man.
Ben, just abstain.
It can't be resolved empirically like that, right? The gardener and the not gardener are not physically identical under physicalism, so you can't resolve it empirically.
Dumbass, they have nothing to do with that because we're not talking about brain states, right? But like I said, you're too inept to even understand what even physicalism even is, right? You couldn't see the difference between a thought experiment.
You're just getting salty and defaulting to name calling.
Sorry, right? Did we hear Iron try to equate?
It's okay, right?
Iron. We all heard Iron.
I accept your apology,
right? Sorry, we all heard. I'm not apologizing to a fascist. We all heard Iron.
You said you were a fascist last night, Yuri.
We all heard Iron. We all heard Iron equate physical states, right, to the garden example, right? But it shows he doesn't even understand what physicalism is or what the thought experiment is trying to show, right? Because he wanted to bring up a whole issue on empiricism, right? And we're all obviously bringing up a conceptual argument, not an empirical one, right? But this guy is such an ignoramus, right? He couldn't even show us, right, how physical states were equated to the thought experiment or conceptual argument, right? So I want Iron to go again, right? I want him to show, right, and address the thought experiment, right?
Say
and
fucking right every 3 words.
Listen, Yuri. It's obvious that you're upset, right? I'm not saying that like I'm making an empirical case that you're incorrect. I'm saying that physicalism makes a lot of conceptual arguments or hypotheticals essentially irrelevant, right? Or like at least they don't really inform anything about the argument. If you accept that physicalism is true, if you accept that everything is like causally determined and everything is based off causation, then any minute difference that you make between the two hypotheticals is going to lead to different outcomes. And unless you can substantiate why they should lead to the same outcome, then you shouldn't expect them to lead to the same outcome. So I'm not saying like I'm not saying there's some kind of like an empirical basis to say that your hypothetical is incorrect. I'm saying your hypothetical doesn't apply well to physical.
I don't see how it's relevant, right? Because we already said that the rule following argument is a conceptual argument. So I don't see how you were able to derive empiricism from the argument, but I just, unless you don't know what it means to have a thought experiment.
No, I'm saying many thought experiments fail against physicalism because they don't take into account essentially like the prime axioms of physicalism.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. What I'm understanding him as saying is that if you want to make this hypothetical as to like run a reductio or something, or show some lacking explanatory power in physicalism, then you can't like have things in a hypothetical that would be incoherent under physicalism or would contradict physicalism, right?
Yeah, but
and he was just saying that on physicalism, two objects having the same physical facts is impossible, right? It's to say that physicalism is false to say something like that.
Look, we can even do this. We can even have fun with this, right? We can
just
even
do the addition-quaddition thing, right? Like I don't think that has anything to do with physical facts, really.
Look, the point is, right? We can even do a similar thing, right? If iron, right? Because the goal is to get iron to concede, right? And if iron is caught up on like the language that's being used, then we can just use possible world semantics, right? So we can just say
possible worlds are largely incoherent on physicalism, or at least they just inform towards specific individual worlds, not our world.
What do you take a possible world to? And why would
I think a possible world is like a logically coherent world, right?
No, a possible world is just to show how the state of affairs of a place could have been. That's all.
Yeah, but that has no bearing on physical.
It's just I don't think that on physicalism you're committed to the view that there can't be such a thing as like the concept of a possible world, right?
No, they can't be. They're all going to be self-referential, right?
No, just 1 second. Like all it takes for like modal claims to hold is that you hold to concepts of logical possibility, right? I take that physicalists hold to like laws of logic and stuff.
No, but I'm just saying like they're all going to be referring to their own insular worlds. Like a possible world in which all cats are red is only going to refer to that isolated world in which all cats are red. It has no bearing on like the physicalist interpretation of a world in which cats are different colors.
Well,
but that's not the point of the argument to try to show.
Yeah, look, the point is just to say that, like a world where all cats are red, right? I don't see how that's gonna show that some criticism of that world or physicalism in that world is not gonna apply to the actual world just because there's some difference in the concrete objects or whatever that are in there, or a difference in physical facts, right?
Yeah, it can apply to the world. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that to try and carry something over from there, like because all cats are red in that world, the fact that cats aren't all red in this world is like an indictment of physicalism.
No, but that's not what. I don't think that's what the rule following argument.
That's not what the argument is trying to show.
I don't think I agree with the full rule following argument, but I think that's not the case.
Look, the point of the rule following argument is to simply show, right, that under one scenario, right, we can point to a reason why we say that the corn failed to grow, right? But it wouldn't even be. But the thing is, it wouldn't in the second garden, right, that we have. If there was no gardener in that second garden, then there wouldn't be anything we could point to show that there was failure there. That's all the
Yeah, of
argument.
course. Right, and the simple solution is that there's organisms called humans in the first example that have some kind of agreed upon rule, like we're trying to grow corn, and that rule can be frustrated or not met or incorrectly met or whatever the fuck, right? And in the second case, those organisms don't exist, and so that rule is not applicable. That would just be like the straightforward, simple solution.
Oh shit.
So yeah, if you have two different physical circumstances, one that has coherent, cognizant individuals and the other that doesn't, you're gonna have different physical results. So, I mean, I think that would be like the simple solution.
Are you guys talking about the rule following argument?
Yeah, we're talking about the rule
Yeah,
following.
Yuri was showing that it's hard for Iron to follow the rule following argument.
I don't
Yeah.
get what this has to do with the rule following argument.
Well, I created a new rule following argument that I was testing out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Yuri, man. You should have just done the addition coaddition example, dude. Why the fuck did you do this shit?
Well, me and Ray were
they're not the
talking.
same?
We were wondering whether or not the original rule following argument we had was too complex. So me and him tried to come up with a different one because we all understood.
What are they different?
We all understood what the goal of the argument was trying to show, but it just seemed like people were getting hung up and missing the point. But I guess this argument did it even worse. So yeah.
The addition coaddition thing seems to like be more understandable to me, at least.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I actually felt the same way. Like I think it's the easiest way to explain it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think I did a good job of explaining it or going into.
In virtue of what are they different, though?
Jesus Christ.
Just everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. I mean, that was really good. Thanks for your.
Oh my god.
Yuri, you really fucked me over, and I concede. I think that you're clearly a black belt. Please don't brutalize me anymore.
Trying to pretend.
Iron's 0 for 2 today.
I'm 0 for 2. I've got a terrible comeback streak.
Yeah, it wasn't even that. It wasn't even that Iron's objections. I did not. I don't think. I'm prepared.
Yeah, you wanted to not win. That's right. That's fine.
No, it wasn't that I wanted to not win. It was just that yeah, I don't think I approached talking to Iron the right way. There's certain ways.
Why did you give up so easily?
Well, yeah, well, it's late and I'm tired, so I'm also sick. So I mean.
And also, Iron's special ability is to continue talking forever. The stamina.
Right.
Dude, you fucking killed me while you're tired and sick. That fucking sucks, dude.
There's something that bothers me about Iron, namely that from my past experiences, I don't like him, but he sounds like adorable, like a nice,
he does sound
cuddly person.
I don't see. Maybe I'm biased. Probably because.
I might be biased because I'm married to him.
This picture of Iron where he looks like this very famous footballer. Well, soccer player. Like he's identical. It's insane.
Well, I am old enough to remember when Tom tried to stop Yuri from.
Yeah, Tom told me. He was like, "Just don't do it." But I just wanted to see what Iron knew. But I have an idea, and I know how to respond to the objections. I'm just not going to do it tonight.
Oh fuck.
Thank you
still
for
sporting the beard?
No, I shaved it off. It was just an experiment.
It was pretty nice, though.
Yeah, I was getting pretty beefy.
Yeah.
Post that picture again.
That was only like a 3-month beard.
Wow. Also, Pantheism 2020.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping it's going to either be Tulsi or Trump in 2020.
She was exposed as what was it? Like some sort of assault on a kid or something because she like slapped a kid or slapped a kid's butt cheek or something.
I guess as earlier tonight, they had that second debate. Cory Booker referred to shithole countries, responding to something Joe Biden said, I think. Didn't sound good.
He said shithole?
Yeah.
Was he
Yeah,
referencing
Booker is trying to play like
Not
that
directly.
edgy angle.
Because some people are really bad with PR. They really don't get how much how politically incorrect they can like